It's a Tuesday edition. It is Orange and Blue today. Cecil Lamming, Andrew Mason, and some news today, Mace. A show we weren't planning on, but anytime we get to reflect on the great Demaryius Thomas, I say let's go for it.
Well, about this time of year is usually when we get a Ring of Fame announcement, if there's going to be one. Of course, the Ring of Fame went on pause for a couple of years around the ownership transition. There were no inductees in 2022 or 2023. Went back in last year with Riley Odoms and Steve Foley, kind of the clean out year from the Orange Crush era, and then back in play this year, and not really a surprise. You see right there Demaryius Thomas with, of course, the stiff arm there in the famous playoff win over the Pittsburgh Steelers back in January of 2012. Demaryius Thomas going into the Ring of Fame. First year of eligibility for the late Broncos wide receiver, and he goes in at the first crack. Not really a surprise that Demaryius Thomas would go in at the first opportunity, Cease.
Yeah, not really a surprise. It gives us an opportunity to talk about DT, when this is going to happen, and also to hear from Greg Penner and Kerry Walton Penner. They say, quote, Demaryius Thomas's election to the Denver Broncos Ring of Fame in his first year of eligibility is a testament to the indelible mark he left on our organization and community. One of the most beloved players and greatest wide receivers in franchise history, Demaryius inspired our fans with breathtaking athleticism, record-setting performances, and a joyful, infectious spirit. While we wish DT was with us to celebrate this special moment, we look forward to honoring Demaryius alongside his Super Bowl 50 teammates during an unforgettable alumni weekend, close quote.
Yeah, because they're going to have the 10-year reunion of the Super Bowl 50 team at that weekend. It's going to be around the New York Giants game on October the 19th. So that's going to be alumni weekend. That's going to be the Super Bowl 50 reunion, the 10-year reunion. Of course, sadly, Demaryius Thomas won't be around for that, but they're going to celebrate him as part of that reunion. And it seems appropriate that they would have this reunion around Demaryius Thomas's induction. And really, we've seen, obviously, Peyton Manning go into the Ring of Fame back in 2021, but this really is going to start the run of players from the Super Bowl 50 team going into the Ring of Fame. Peyton Manning, certainly, he retired first. He retired after the 2015 season, retired immediately, played Super Bowl 50, retired a little over a month later. But now we're going to start seeing some Super Bowl 50 players eventually go into the Ring of Fame. I think we'll get into that in a little bit here. And Demaryius Thomas, of course, retiring a few years later. Really the second best wide receiver in Broncos history. Among Broncos wide receivers, second in receptions behind Rod Smith. Shannon Sharpe had more catches than Demaryius Thomas, but of course, Shannon Sharpe, a tight end for nearly all of his career. Demaryius Thomas, second in receiving yards, second in receiving touchdowns. So among Broncos wide receivers, really only Rod Smith exceeds him. And if only one player exceeds you at a position like wide receiver, you're definitely Ring of Fame worthy.
Yeah, and good old Josh McDaniels didn't get a lot right, but I remember this draft. I was at Radio City Music Hall, and when Demaryius is picked, it was over Dez Bryant. And a lot of people at the time had Bryant as the number one receiver, Thomas right there as well. But at Georgia Tech, they attempted 8 passes a game. Didn't complete 8 passes a game, attempted 8 passes a game. Yet with that size-speed combination on film, what he showed, of course, coming into the NFL a little bit banged up, Josh McDaniels chose Demaryius over Dez. And I know that was a talking point when it first happened.
Think about that. They're attempting 8 passes a game because, of course, Paul Johnson running the triple option. He came over from Navy, right? So they're attempting 8 passes a game. And in 2009, Demaryius Thomas's last year at Georgia Tech, it was a big year for Georgia Tech. They went 11-3, finished number 13 in the country. In 14 games, Demaryius Thomas had only 42 catches. So he's averaging barely 3 catches a game. But when you're only attempting, 8 passes a game that year, I believe it was. I mean, let's go through the numbers here. Okay, 168. Okay, they completed 78 passes. So what's 78 divided by 14?
Yeesh.
They're complete. So they're completing 5.5 passes per game. They're attempting more than 8. They actually attempted 12 passes a game in 2009. So, that's not great.
That's not great, Bob.
No. So, but they completed 5.5 passes per game. Demaryius Thomas has a little over 3 of those completion/catches per game. But he averaged 25 yards a catch. So when he got the ball, he made it count. Despite having such a limited passing game, Demaryius Thomas that year averaged 82 receiving yards per game. Think about this for a moment. Georgia Tech accounted for 1,774 passing yards in the 2009 season, and Demaryius Thomas accounted for over 1,150 of those yards on his own. So,
wow.
He was roughly 2/3 of their passing offense as a wide receiver on his own. And the other thing, he blocked. And in a triple option offense, if you're a wide receiver, you have to block or you don't play. And so he blocked effectively. And that was something that would serve him very well in Denver, especially because 2 years into his career, he gets to Denver. They throw the ball around a lot his rookie season, but he's still getting used to things. And of course, Josh McDaniels decided for some strange reason to use Demaryius on kickoff returns, and he got blown up against Baltimore, suffered a concussion. I mean, what was Josh McDaniels thinking? You could say that for a lot of things of Josh McDaniels. What was he thinking? Although he certainly did think right in drafting Demaryius Thomas, but really didn't use him right as a rookie. Year 2, of course, is the Tim Tebow year, where after a while, they stopped passing the football. But it's interesting I bring up how Demaryius is effectively the second best receiver in Broncos history behind Rod Smith, because there's a moment that year. Rod Smith was around the Bronco facility. John Fox, one of the great things he did after the Josh McDaniels years was welcome all the Broncos alumni back. Basically said, hey, come on back. There were a lot of connections that got frayed under Josh McDaniels. John Fox did his best to restore them. And so one day, in the first John Fox year, the Tim Tebow year, Rod Smith is around and the receivers are frustrated. They're frustrated with the Tim Tebow offense. They're frustrated with not getting the ball because it's getting to where they're passing, 8, 10, 11 times a game. And so opportunities are scarce. And Rod Smith tells those guys, hey, listen, you can't worry about that. It's out of your control. All you can do is focus on the opportunities that you do get and make the most of them. Nobody took that to heart more than Demaryius Thomas. And this moment goes down just before the Broncos go play the Minnesota Vikings. This is, of course, in the middle of those, of that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was the 6-game winning streak that they go on, that they go from 2-5 to 8-5. And the Minnesota game was one of the moments where it was starting to be clear that teams were beginning to figure out Tim Tebow, because they shut the Broncos down in the first half. And then at halftime comes a pivot to, all right, we're going to go a lot of I formation. And the one thing that Tim Tebow could do passing wise effectively was go deep vertically. And that was where Demaryius Thomas started to become Demaryius Thomas. And early on, hits Demaryius Thomas deep, gets the kickstarts the offense, right? It's Demaryius Thomas's first big game. The Broncos come back and beat Minnesota, and Demaryius Thomas that day, 4 catches, 144 yards, 2 touchdowns. So think about that. Here he is in year 2, and his first big game, is a game very much like the kind of games that he would have at Georgia Tech, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that starts Demaryius Thomas. People would sometimes say, Cease, that Demaryius was a product of Peyton Manning. And to that, I say that's total crap, because the big games for Demaryius Thomas started when Tim Tebow was throwing him the football. 4 catches, $144 against Minnesota. A week later, 7 for 78 against Chicago. A week after that, 7 for $116 against New England. A week after that, 4 for 76 against Buffalo. And then after a rough game against Kansas City, the big game in the playoffs, including the 80-yard catch and run for a touchdown that you saw in that picture to lead off the show, 204 yards on 4 receptions against Pittsburgh, and then another 93 yards in the playoff loss at New England. Demaryius Thomas established himself over those 7 games at the end of the 2011 season as a terrific receiver with a less than optimal NFL quarterback throwing him the football. Demaryius Thomas is not a product of Peyton Manning. Demaryius Thomas was a great receiver of his own accord, without necessarily having a great quarterback throwing him the football.
You're being very nice about Tim Tebow, but I will say this: that I mean, Ike Taylor was posterized in that play, and Ryan Mundy coming down. I mean, they saw it immediately. Dick LeBeau, like the most disrespectful game plan you could ever have. Demaryius makes him pay. And I will say this: when Peyton showed up, and the first day of OTAs, Mace, you'll remember the tale. Peyton Manning throws a pass, and the pass falls short. Says, run it again. Peyton Manning throws another pass to Demaryius Thomas, and it falls short. He says, run it again, and he adds, did I say 25 or did I say 22? Next play, Demaryius runs it at 22, puts it right between the 8 and the 8.
Yeah.
And that's where the precision, because Demaryius Thomas was a screen guy and a go route guy, but the precision that he learned, and listen, Peyton, he broke guys like Cody Latimer. You know, he broke them because of his demand, but he demanded this upon Demaryius, and Demaryius responded from the first day and became such a well-rounded receiver.
He wanted to be pushed.
Yes.
He had the greatness in him, and we saw that with Tim Tebow throwing him the football, but he needed that push to take him to the higher level, and that's what he ended up getting. And that started a streak of 5 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, 3 of which he was over 1,400 yards. All 4 seasons, by the way, with Peyton Manning, he was over 1,300 yards in receiving. 5 straight Pro Bowl seasons, by the way. The thing that, of course, with Demaryius Thomas that you look back on, you mentioned, of course, you know, he posterizes like Taylor. When you think of Demaryius Thomas, you think of him dragging guys. Mm-hmm. You think of him making the catch and then needing 2 or 3 players to bring him down, because he was so unique at 6'3", 225 pounds. It wasn't one defender bringing him down. It was usually 2 or 3. So the thing that happened, unfortunately, is that he took so much of a pounding during his career, because instead of 190 or 200 pounds of man bringing him down, it was 380, 400, 420 pounds of man bringing him down. And unfortunately, that was part of what led to him kind of having some decline in his numbers. Certainly the quarterback instability didn't help, but we saw as he got to year 7, year 8, unfortunately the numbers declined for him precipitously, because he did take such a pounding there, even in his prime years, because he would fight for that extra yard, and because it took so much to bring him down, because he was such a physical specimen.
The smile, I'll always remember, Mase. You had plenty more interactions than I, but in being around that facility on a near daily basis, I mean, you and I both got to see the human being.
Yeah.
You know, the football player on the field was fantastic. The human being, just the guy, the teammate, the friend, is even better.
The team captain, the leader as well. And one of those guys, He could lead with words, but very much he led by example. And he really grew into that role as well. Certainly one of those players and people who you saw mature and grow as time passed. Sometimes, when these guys come in, like Demaryius Thomas, he was drafted 22 years old. You see somebody who comes in very young and really kind of becomes a man in the years that he's here. Certainly, I think experiences do that to you, and I think you grow, you become more accountable. I think you mentioned the Peyton Manning story, learning about attention to detail, learning that your talent can only take you but so far, that you've got to be precise if you're going to have the kind of success that allows you to really maximize the gifts that you possess coming into the league. Because everyone comes in the league with talent, but there's the old cliche, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Well, Demaryius Thomas is what happens when talent does work hard, and you end up seeing the kind of career that he has, that he had, especially during that imperial phase of his career, where he had 5 straight 1,000-yard seasons, 5 straight Pro Bowls, a run that is nearly unmatched for any wide receiver in Broncos history.
Yep. Remember Demaryius well, and we're so happy that he makes it into the Ring of Fame. Mase, this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And we're happy that it did happen today, announced.
Glad it happened at the first crack too, and also glad that he's going in by himself. I mean, you've had the multiple player classes, and certainly, Aqib Talib's eligible as well. So you could have had Aqib Talib going at the same time, but I'm glad that Demaryius Thomas is having his day. I would actually say, and we could certainly do another show on Ring of Famers of the future, because someone like Al Wilson's still waiting from the early 2000s. Someone like Trevor Price is still waiting. Ryan Clady's still waiting. I mean, we've gone from one era of backlog to another, but I do think you probably need to get Demaryius Thomas in at the first crack, and you needed to have him have his own day. That you're going to have it with the Super Bowl 50 reunion, I think, is very appropriate. I think it's a good centerpiece to that moment, that first real reunion of that team, to have this. I'd say maybe with Aqib Talib, he will be a Ring of Famer, almost certainly. 4 Pro Bowls in 4 seasons, being a key part of the ring of the no-fly zone. I was going Ring of Fame, Orange Crush, no-fly zone. Being a key part of the no-fly zone, I think, puts him in the Ring of Fame. To me, down the line for Aqib Talib, I think it would be appropriate for him to go in with Chris Harris Jr. together. Mm-hmm. You're not going to induct the entire no-fly zone, and certainly, for example, TJ Ward only played for the Broncos 3 years, so by the standards that Pat Bowlen put in, that you had to play 4 seasons, he wouldn't be eligible. But Chris Harris Jr. and Aqib Talib, I think, certainly meet the threshold for Ring of Fame induction. And so they, I think, would be good representatives of the no-fly zone. And to me, down the line, probably when Chris Harris Jr. is eligible, I think it would be appropriate to put them in together to represent the no-fly zone. But and I think that day will come at some point in the near future. But right now, I think giving Demaryius his own year, the memory of Demaryius Thomas, having his own moment, and having probably most of his teammates from Super Bowl 50 there to celebrate, I think is very appropriate here for this year.
Pretty fantastic. That is for sure. Pretty fantastic for y'all to help us out on YouTube, Mase. How can folks do that?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell,
so that you
never
miss a vid. That's right. He's Andrew Mason. Follow him on all the socials at Mase Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammy saying OBT's BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned, and would you please stay frosty.